Well, let's talk about more Math 1111 with some quantitative literacy, and we're in the middle of this chapter all about managing money. And what I want to talk to you about today is kind of putting some things together that we've been talking about, setting things up for the next lesson or two after this. What you need to think about before developing a financial plan. I'll tell you one thing about a financial plan, and if you don't have one, a decade goes by or 15 or 20 years go by and you haven't done anything yet, and all of a sudden you're looking up and you're saying, oh my God, I need to get this done. So it's really important to start when you're young. And I do want you to remember that this is not about becoming rich. If you want to be rich, talk to somebody other than me. But it is about trying to gain some sense of financial independence, being able to make the world a little bit better place through the money. That is a tool. It's not good, it's not bad, it's a tool. It's like a hammer or a shovel, okay? And the other thing is that you're about to step out into this great big world, and I don't want you feeling overwhelmed by bills that you have to pay, because it makes life extremely difficult. The number one reason for divorce in households is not adultery, it's not cheating on, it's money. It's battles and fights over money. So for so many reasons, it's very difficult to be a great teacher if you're stuck going to work every day thinking about a marriage that's falling apart. But on the other hand, if you and your spouse are directed in the same direction, and you are aligned in your thought processes and your plan, and you're following a financial plan, that leaves you time to be better spouses to each other, better parents to your children, and a better teacher for those that you have in class. And along the way, you gain a little sense of financial independence, which means that you don't have to struggle every day. And as one who has been there on both sides of this equation, I am looking to impart some ideas to you. Okay, you are a young pup going out into this world, and you have all the talent in the world and all the potential in the world. But if you don't learn from the mistakes and the lessons of others, then you are bound to make them yourself, and then it's a lot more painful. Better to learn from other people. So what are we going to talk about today? Our typical agenda. We're going to do some praxis prep. That's critically important. You know that. The review material of the most recent lessons, and then today's classwork contemplations. Now, as far as praxis prep goes, the importance here is that if your dream is to be a teacher and you can't pass the praxis test, then we got a problem. So we want to make it a point to try to find the kind of questions that, with some test savvy, which means wiseness about how you test. Remember, I gave you the example of the wrestler circling his back to the edge of the mat in the beginning of the course. You want to be as smart as you possibly can about how you handle preparation for the test and how you take test questions. And sometimes, if we understood how to be better test takers and a little bit of basic math, it'll help us get through the test. In fact, not sometimes, all the time. And that's what the praxis prep questions are about. They're about helping you prepare for that test so that you can get through it better. So here's our first question. Begin. You know the drill. Stop and start. Okay. This is probably the third or fourth time you've seen this one. The percent increase is the absolute difference over the reference or the original amount. In this case, the absolute difference is going to be the amount in 2005, which is 1817, minus the amount in 2002, which is 1430, over the original amount, because it says compared to those sold in 2002. So word order does not necessarily match what is first and what is second. You have to read through the question to understand it. It says, what's the percent increase in cars sold in 2005 when you compare it to those sold in 2002? So 2002 is the starting point. Then you go to 2005 and compare it to 2002. So there's the numbers put in place. I subtract, I divide by, I should have divided by 1430. I did divide by 1430, by the way. I just forgot to change it on this. So this denominator here should be 1430. It comes out to 24%. Okay, next question is about stem and leaf plot. Now we're going to get into a series of new questions about or new praxis type questions, what I do is I Google sample praxis questions, common praxis questions, what the most popular ones are. And then I take the ones that I think are quickest and easiest to learn and things that you can learn some test savvy from, and I present them. So that's what we're doing here. I never took the praxis. Back in the day, we took a test called the NTE, which was the National Teacher Exam. I did really, really well on it. And one of the reasons for that is I got a lot of test savvy. If you went to Bayport High School, you learned test savvy. Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen stem and leaf plots before, but give it a shot. We'll see what's what. Okay, so this down at the bottom, we call this a key, and this means 3 bar 2 is 32. So for example, 2 bar 1 is 21, 2 bar 3 is 23, 2 bar 5 is 25, 3 bar 0 is 30, and so on. So one of the things that I notice among certain kids is they'll get into a little bit of an anxiety state going into a test. And rather than thinking about test savvy and what they do know, they get frustrated by what they don't know. And it stops their natural talent from coming out. When you see a question like this, don't be intimidated if you haven't seen stem and leaf plots before. There's enough information here to make for intelligent choices. When it says 3 bar 2 is 32, just take a look at choice A. Is there a 3 bar 0? Sure. Is there a 2 bar 3? Yes. Is there a 6 bar 0? I don't think so. 5 bar 1? Yes. And a 4 bar 5? Absolutely. Therefore, the correct answer is 60. That's the one that's not represented. Again, no need to get frustrated or concerned or anxious in this particular moment. Just read it through and then compare the choices. The other thing, too, is if you're taking the test, if you encounter a question like this and you're not sure how to do it, just skip it. Do not attempt it. Go do every single question on the test that you know how to do. Get them all done, because the vast majority of those you're going to get correct. Then go back and think longer about a question like this, if it is that you didn't know how to do it. Okay. All right, what's the product? Go ahead. Okay, so a very interesting phenomenon occurred back when I first started teaching about integers. I would give a quiz on a Monday about adding integers, and on Tuesday, based on a lesson Monday about adding integers. I'd get 80s to 100s, everybody on the quiz. Give 10 questions, everybody get 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 right. Most would get 10 out of 10. Then Tuesday we would do subtraction, and I knew that there was a little different way I like to present subtraction over a few years, because there really is no such thing. And I would get pretty good grades, like let's say 70 to 100s, but still a lot of good grades. And then I would introduce the multiplying and dividing lesson on Wednesday and give a quiz on Thursday. And the grades would fall off to 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, still a few hundreds, but I'd get a whole lot of lower grades. And I reasoned that the reason is because the rules for addition and subtraction begin the same as the rules for multiplication and division. The rules most teachers teach for addition and subtraction are: when the signs are the same, add them; when the signs are different, keep the same sign. Subtract and keep the sign a bigger number. The rules for multiplying and dividing are: when the sign's the same, it's positive; when the signs are different, it's a negative. And I said, I better change the way we present one of those so that they don't sound like the other one. And I did. There's actually better ways I actually changed both, and there's better ways to understand both. The way I changed multiplying and dividing is this. If you multiply or divide by a negative, change the sign, because you're negating the thing. What's the negation of a really good day? It's a bad day. What's the negation of a really bad day? It's a good day. So you multiply by the number, and then you only switch the sign if you're multiplying or dividing by a negative. So once I did that, kids went back up to 80 to 100 on their quizzes all the time. So product means the answer to multiplication. So I got to multiply these. Unfortunately, my H key sticks, as you could see it here. The rules for operating with integers can be confusing for a few reasons. An easy way to understand multiplying and dividing is that if you multiply or divide by a negative, you change the sign. And this is what I mean. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Why? Well, 2 times 1 is 2, but when I multiply by this negative 1, I have to change the original sign. The original sign was a positive 2, I changed it to a negative. Then I multiply by a positive, so I don't change any signs. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. Then I multiply by a negative 3. Now I change the sign because I'm multiplying by a negative. So the negative 8 times the negative 3 will give me 24. Then I'm multiplying by a positive 6, so I don't change any signs, and I get 144. So 144 is the correct answer. I think we're going to do a question similar to this for probably upwards of 5 or 6 lessons in a row to really drive this point home. Okay, next question. Find the perimeter of the triangle, and you know what this means. We've done a number of questions that call for the Pythagorean theorem in the last couple of weeks. Go ahead. Okay, so leg squared plus leg squared is hypotenuse squared. The two legs make up the right angle, so it's the 5, and this other missing leg, I didn't write it there, but it's n. And then 13 is the length of the hypotenuse. So n squared plus 5 squared is 13 squared. Doing a little math here, squaring both of them, 25 and 169. Subtracting the 25, I get 144. Square root of 144 is 12. So if I substitute in a 12 here, I get 5 and 12 is 17, and 13 is 30. There's my correct answer. Okay, next up, if 3x minus 7 is 17, then what is the value of negative 8x plus 21? Now, this is tougher than the ones we've been doing lately because most of the time with an equation, we just said, hey, here's the equation, which is the answer. And we said, if you don't know how to solve the equation, you just substitute all the choices and find which one works. Not so simple here. In order to do this one, you've got to know how to do the equation. Go ahead. So, solving the equation, remember, get letters on one side, numbers on the other, and do inverse or opposites. So, add 7 to both sides, 3x is 24. Divide by 3, x is 8. And then you got to substitute the 8 in for x here, and I get negative 8 times 8 is negative 64, plus 21 is negative 43. There's my answer. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, next up. And our last praxis problem of the day. What is the greatest common factor? Go ahead. Okay, so sometimes students get factors and multiples mixed up. Multiples are bigger because you're multiplying to get the answer, multiplying whole numbers. So like 3 times 5 times 7, these are when you're multiplying 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, and so on. Those are all multiples. Factors divide into things. Remember when you were a kid and you did factor trees, right? You break them down. So that's how you know factors are smaller. So what you're doing is you're looking for the biggest number on this list that divides into both. Okay, so did you remember factors divide into numbers like the factor trees we just discussed? So what's the biggest factor that divides into both 42 and 28? Well, it's 14. But let's say you're not sure of what number divides into both 42 and 28. Just plug in the choices. Try every single one of the choices. That's a big step toward test savvy. When you don't know how to do it, you don't get frustrated and angry. You can skip it, go on again, do all the ones you know how to do, and then go back and say, well, if I can't figure out how to do the question, I can see if the choices work for the question. So the correct answer is E. All right, praxis problems done. Remember, the whole idea is to get everybody to pass that praxis test so that you can begin that teaching career. And then all of this financial stuff becomes important. And the financial stuff's important no matter what career you get. But the angle I'm taking on it is the one of someone who's going to build a teaching career because that is what I have lived. Okay?